Ever watched a suburb flip before your eyes? Yesterday it was sleepy and cheap. Today, cafes, cranes, million-dollar listings. That's gentrification. And it's already happening in some of Melbourne's next hotspots. In this episode, we'll show you how to spot the signs early. See it before it comes and before the price surges hit. All right, guys, let's get into it. Welcome back to Peter Kelly Property. Keen for this one today because as we're going to go through this next cutting cycle that everyone's tipped is going to occur, a rate cutting cycle, potentially we're going to see property go up. That's what usually happens when money gets cheaper. We need to see where to buy. So if you're an investor, you're an owner-occupier, where's the suburb you're going to look for? And this episode, we're going to teach you the signs of looking at, hey, this is a suburb that is gentrifying. There's going to be potential growth here. I can see it happening. I'm looking at certain projects, certain signs like cafes, new business, all this sort of stuff that's happening in an area, and I want to get in there early so I can enjoy that capital growth that's going to happen with the gentrification of an area. Let's get into it. All right, what are the signs of an area that's gentrifying? Okay, so quickly I will say there's some areas, depending on where you're buying, that they have gentrified. Okay, so it's obvious. They've got sought after schools, they've got great shopping precincts, they've got reserves, play areas, everything in walking distance, might be close to water, public transport's been existing for years, all these sorts of things that are underpinning a blue chip area, okay? That's obvious. Good areas are good areas, blue chip areas are blue chip areas. What we want to look at is, though, what are areas that maybe are a bit underwhelming, or they have been underwhelming? Which ones are gentrifying? And how do we tell which ones are gentrifying and getting in before they gentrify? But we want to get in at the start of that gentrification cycle, not, wow, they might gentrify one day and you got to hold it for 20, 30 years waiting for the gentrification. Okay, what are the signs? Signs will be looking at the retail areas and the lifestyle of that suburb. Okay, so are there little trendy cafes or trendy bakeries starting to pop up? Are people saying, hey, this is a suburb where I want to be, where I want to start a shop? They've done their research. They're thinking there's more disposable income in an area. Potentially there's a higher demographic of punter moving to that area that is looking to spend money on the nicer things. So nicer cafes are moving in, Pilates studios, gyms, all these sorts of things, slowly but surely filling up the old shopping strip that used to be there, or maybe new shopping centers or things like this, things where people want to be close to. So we talk about this a lot. Property has a lot to do with living near where people want to be. So an area is becoming a place where more people want to be. So the key is, and where you would start, looking at areas that maybe haven't been desirable, okay? Keeping an eye on them. So whether you're looking here in Victoria, whether you're looking across Australia, this is methodology that you can use wherever you're doing your research or wherever you're looking to buy to live or buy to invest. Okay, so looking at the shopping strips, like I said, looking at the cafes, looking at what sort of retail or service industry is coming to that area. Another super important one is looking at what sort of projects are happening in that area. So look up your council websites, go into council, if you are somewhat local, or you can give them a bell and say, what are the projects that are happening? Look at the state government websites for more those bigger type infrastructure projects. What's happening? Is there new train loops coming into that area? And it may not be next year, but it may be in 5 years' time that these areas have been earmarked for massive infrastructure projects. Okay, so, and also if you are investing or are looking to live, obviously these are long-term strategies, long-term moves. So if these areas are earmarked for maybe new schools, new shopping centres, new train and transport, new recreation and sporting reserves, all these sorts of things that are earmarked for down the track, they're the things we want to know. They're the indicators, because once they're there, once they're getting built, once they're mainstream media, the fact that they're there, it's going to be too late, because people that do the research, they're the ones that win. they're the ones that get in before all the other punters. Okay, so looking up what sort of projects are coming to the area, super important one. Okay, looking at maybe schools. Are schools gentrifying in the area? A super important one. We've covered schools. We've covered schools a lot. As schools are starting to get more popular, finding out this information can be a little bit more tricky. Maybe looking at forums, looking at size of zones, looking at maybe incoming people to certain surrounding areas. Is that going to make these pockets even more sought after as maybe new subdivisions are happening on the fringes? Is going to bring more people to the area, going to make these certain areas more sought after, more popular, and suddenly the schools start to gentrify, and so on and so forth. So the villages, you're seeing those things happen in front of your eyes, and then looking at potentially what is earmarked for that area and what you can expect. Because once they start happening, it's too late. Once the train network gets upgraded or a new train line gets implemented, it's too late. It's already happening. So yeah, do your research, what's coming to the area, and boots on the ground. Boots on the ground, looking at the shops, look and feel, looking at new families, looking who is actually occupying these areas. So it's definitely a very diligent way of figuring out whether an area is gentrifying. Very hard just to do it from behind a laptop. Okay, so I would advise getting out, boots on the ground, and feeling an area, compare, and also comparison is your best friend as well. So don't just go to an area and think it's gentrifying. Find multiple areas and challenge the 4 areas. Which one's gentrifying the most? Comparison will get you there, because sometimes you can trick yourself into a lot of areas are gentrifying when they're not. So make sure you use the comparison and compare the pair, and make sure that you figure out which one's looking the best and going to go on the most aggressive gentrification path. All right, let's get into the next one. All right, guys, let's get into a quick case study. Bonnie's dug up a case study. This is an example. These examples happen everywhere. You might be able to relate to the area you live, and maybe something that's occurred that has probably driven house prices a bit. And to be honest, you've got to have your finger on the pulse to be able to see these things before they happen, but even appreciate them afterwards, because sometimes you don't see it in the moment unless you're living it. You might go on for 3 years and go, wow, property prices have gone up 20% in those 3 years. And a lot of it can be a result of some infrastructure, some changes, and some gentrification to an area. But you got to have your finger on the pulse to appreciate it. So Bonnie's picked out sunny Glen Waverley. It's a compelling case study of how infrastructure and urban planning can elevate a suburb's profile. So Glen Waverley Shopping Centre was approved to have about $500 million spent on it and go through a massive revamp and development. Things like that will elevate a suburb's profile. Okay, they had the massive residential project as well, Sky Garden Apartments, which happened there. So it just elevated the whole suburb's profile. It's got train line there, so it's got transport, and it's got this massive shopping centre where people want to be close to. So again, like I said, property is about being close to where people want to be. And the more people that want to be close to it, that's going to drive competition and drive price up. So Glen Waverley, between circa 2018 and 23, so in that 5 years, and this is post these this money being spent on the Glen Waverley Shopping Centre, and post this gentrification, saw a growth, or a suburb growth, of around 50% over those 5 years. And in 2015, the Glen Waverley shopping centre redevelopment got approved in 2015. And now between 18 and 23, it's seen 50% growth. Now, I'm not saying other suburbs haven't grown through these areas, but we have to contribute a lot of that investment into that suburb, elevating the suburb profile, being a place where people want to be, and getting excited about the suburb, wanting to be close to these new redevelopments and these new investments, does have an impact on that capital growth. So thanks, Bonnie. Great case study, and just an example of how gentrification to an area, because that's the thing, Glen Waverley, a good area of Melbourne, a solid area of Melbourne, bang, gets approved for a massive redevelopment, ticks transport, ticks all these other factors, gets this redevelopment and this investment, will help the suburb growth. So that's one example. You can probably put in the comments below gentrification that's happened in your area. Why did an area gentrify and what was the driver? Really interested to know. Okay, team, and another one I'll touch on quickly, the suburban rail loop, which is here in Victoria. It's going to connect more suburbs and it's going to roll through the Melbourne Airport. So the Melbourne Airport doesn't have train on location. They don't have train. They have buses. They have sky buses and all this sort of stuff. So, the transport can be okay, but no train. The suburban rail loop is going to connect these suburbs with the Melbourne Airport. So that's an interesting one. So again, these things are being proposed and being locked in and look to be happening, these projects. Don't know where the governments and the state government's going to get the money from, but anyway, that's a whole nother episode. These are the sorts of things that you want to look at because potentially this is what's going to do to some of these suburbs that maybe have been a bit isolated. They've been isolated. They haven't seen that gentrification because they haven't got that connectivity. Something like this can connect suburbs that in the past haven't been connected. So another project and another example of gentrification via connectivity and transport and these sorts of things. All right, guys, well, let's wrap this up. Before we wrap it up, how do you get in early without overpaying? Like I said, we've just been through in the last, 8 to 9 minutes what the things are we need to look for. How do we get in? How do we get in at a good price? Identifying a suburb on the cusp of gentrification definitely requires a keen eye and diligent research. Like I said, boots on the ground. It's the best type of research. And also remember, for a tip to find areas that are going to gentrify, find areas that have gentrified or are gentrifying. What's the next suburb out? Why wouldn't that suburb gentrify like the last one? As population grows, as people get priced out of that suburb, they get priced into this one. If that one's rising, why wouldn't this one rise? And why wouldn't it ripple? Why wouldn't the ripple effect out into these other suburbs? So that's the first place to look. Make sure you're monitoring council announcements, state government announcements. Where's the money? Where's the money flowing? Where's the investment happening? Because you want to piggyback off the back of that investment via government, private investment, whatever that looks like. And like I said, make sure you keep an eye on the demographic. Who's coming to these areas? What are the type of people, type of professionals coming to these areas? And then look at the next one out. And don't go too far out, just the next suburb. Might be just a street. Might be a street. What are the next schools that are going to gentrify out from that street? Be the buyer. Put your buyer headset on. Why would someone want to live here? But let's get in early before the gentrification happens, okay? All right, guys, that's a wrap. If you want to do a knockdown rebuild, dual occupancy or multi-unit development site, book a consultation, book in our buyer's advocacy. If you're looking to buy something to potentially activate down the track, that's what we specialize in. And as you can hear, we go pretty deep on our research, pretty deep on our suburb profiles, suburbs that are about to go, suburbs that have gone, what's the next opportunity. So yeah, you're in safe hands when it comes to that. So if we can help, book a consultation. Come across to Instagram, Peter Kelly Property. We're doing some cool stuff over there. Go over there, show your support. And thanks for hanging around this long in the video. We love you all. Jump in the comments. Appreciate the support. Enjoy. See you on the next one.